move on to, I hope, our next speaker, Vera, if you're available to speak now. Just to reconfirm, one of the speakers on the program, Nyachang, has had to drop out. So we have two remaining speakers, both online, Vera Mahadi and Jennifer Subek. And any of those online who put up their hands just at the end there, I think Suka, you did, wanting to ask a question. We'll hold that for the next section of questions and audience discussion. Vera, so to introduce you, Vera is joining us from the United States. She is affiliated with a group called the Women Peacemakers South Sudan in the United States organization. She's a member of the Equatorian South Sudanese Community Association in the United States, and she's a commissioner for health with the South Sudanese opposition group, the National Salvation Front, and she's a registered nurse by profession. She's indicated she'll be speaking on the theme of roles, challenges, and the way forward for women to be included in nation building and governance in Sudan and South Sudan. Vera, over to you, please, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ahmed for organizing this conference and Ambassador Federico Voni for inviting me to share my perspective on the critical roles, challenges, and way forward for women inclusion in nation building and governance in Sudan and South Sudan. My aspirations in politics started at a younger age as I witnessed my mom's participation in women unions in South Sudan and experiencing the countless stories from my dad serving in the Abud army that landed him in Southern Sudan. And I am the product of this encounter. Being born in Juba, South Sudan gives me the right to call myself a South Sudanese by birth, by the virtue of my mom's identity. My dad, being from the Nuba Mountains, linked me to Sudan. You can imagine what I felt when South Sudan gains its independence. I get to live with the reality that politics have turned my unique identity into two separate countries. However, as a woman, I have come to realize that across the globe, our pains and the issues that affects us are similar. As such, coming together and embracing each other as women is of essence. My journey as a women's rights activist has enhanced my views of what we as women need to concentrate on. I will be generalizing most of my points because it does apply to women in both countries. In Sudan and South Sudan, the courageous involvement of women in politics is not just about sharing power. It is about healing wounds, bridging divides, and sowing the seeds for a future rooted in peace and justice. In Sudan and South Sudan, women have emerged as virtual architects of political change beyond traditional roles. Their engagement sprang grassroots mobilization to high-level policy influences, challenging enchanted norms and fueling processes of reconciliation, peace building, and democratic renewal. Their resilience not only transforms political discourse, but also strengthens the foundation for a more inclusive and just future in the region long affected by conflict. Not long ago, we were one nation. Today, we stand two different nations with similar challenges. One in complete breakdown of central authority, and the other experiencing fragmented authority with limited territorial reach, both facing erosion of public institution, service delivery, and inability to protect civilian populations of which the majority are women and children. In both countries, women's political participation has been shaped by the intersection of colonial legacies, armed conflicts, religious influences, and traditional gender norms. The progress has been non-linear, with periods of advancements followed by setbacks, particularly during times of political instability or conflict. As we will once again see these women emerge from the rubbles of what is left of their countries, allow me to articulate on the critical roles, challenges, and way forward in the participation of these women in nation building and governance in their respective countries. To better understand the critical roles of women in nation building and governance, I would focus on women-led initiatives such as inclusive political development, conflict resolution and peace building, democratic representation and legitimacy, and economic benefits. Women's participation in politics in Sudan and South Sudan has led to more comprehensive approaches to societal issues. For example, studies shows that women legislators in both countries tend to prioritize issues often overlooked in male-dominant politics, including maternal health care, girls' education, and family welfare. When women participate in local governance, there are evidence of increased resource allocation to community needs, which affects women's daily lives. In South Sudan's parliament, women parliamentarians have championed legislations addressing gender-based violence and child marriages, issues that previously received minimum or no attention at all. Women politicians often advocate for other marginalized groups, creating more inclusive governance overall. When we look into conflict resolution and peace building, women bring a unique perspective and approaches to peace processes. For example, grassroots connections, where women politicians in both countries often maintain stronger connections to community-level concerns, bringing those perspectives into national peace dialogues. Research indicates that women negotiators in South Sudan's peace processes have employed more collaborative negotiation styles, focusing on common ground rather than zero-sum positions. Women's participations correlate with peace agreements that include specific implementation provisions, as such improving sustainability. Looking at stakeholder engagements, women-led peace initiatives in both countries have typically involved more diverse stakeholders, including youth and civil society organizations. Now, when we look into how root causes are addressed, women peace builders in Sudan and South Sudan have consistently raised issues of economic inequalities, resource distribution, and social justice as essential components of lasting peace. Women political participations also strengthened democratic institutions, with women comprising most of the population in both countries. Their political participations creates more representation of governance. Some studies suggest that inclusive governance structures with gender diversity inspire greater public confidence in political institutions. Women in visible political positions also inspire younger generations of women to participate in civic life. Women participations bring different leadership approaches, often emphasizing collaborations, consensus building, and longer-term planning. Both countries have gained international recognition for efforts to increase women's political participations, as such strengthening their diplomatic positions. Women political participations also correlate with broader economic advantages. For example, women legislators in both countries have advocated for budget processes that consider gender impacts, leading to more efficient resource allocations, as well as resulting in policies that are supporting women's economic activities, such as microfinance initiatives and market access programs. Women politicians have championed education and training programs that increase women's workforce participation, contributing to economic growth. These benefits demonstrate that women political participation is not merely a matter of fairness, but delivers tangible improvements in governance, peace building, and economic developments. Now let's look at the challenges that women face while practicing politics in Sudan and South Sudan. Some of the challenges that these women have faced in the past and continue to endure in the present can be highlighted under structural barriers, political marginalization, security concerns, and institutional challenges. Women in politics encounter deeply entrenched obstacles to meaningful political participation. For example, our traditional beliefs that women belong in domestic spaces rather than in public leadership positions remain very powerful. Family responsibilities are often considered primary for women, making political careers difficult to pursue. Lower literacy rates and educational attainment among women creates fundamental disadvantages. In South Sudan, for example, only about 16% of women are illiterate compared to about 40% of men. Limited access to financial resources also hampered women's ability to fund campaigns or sustain political careers. Women often lack property ownership rights or independent income sources necessary for political independence. Despite constitutional provisions for equality, many laws in both countries still contained discriminatory elements. Implementation of gender equality provisions remains very weak, with limited enforcement mechanisms. Internal party processes often marginalize women, with male-dominant leadership making candidacy selection decisions. Women are frequently assigned to unwinnable positions on party lists. Looking at the political marginalization, even when women gain political positions, they face significant challenges to exercising real power. Women are often included to meet codes, but excluded from meaningful decision-making. Their presence is sometimes used to legitimize decisions made in exclusively male circles. Women politicians are disproportionately assigned to soft ministries like social welfare or gender affairs rather than finance, defense, or foreign affairs portfolios. When we look at the lack of political network, exclusion from informal political networks where real decisions are made limits women's influences. As such, political mentorship remains largely unavailable to women. Women politicians face discrimination regarding their appearances, family status, and personal conduct. Their competency is more frequently questioned than male counterparts. Resistance to women's leadership is often open, and undermining of women's authority by male colleagues and subordinates also create hostile work environments. Security concern is another issue. Women in politics face specific security threats that create significant barriers. For example, political violence, where women politicians and candidates often experience targeted violence including physical attacks and assassination attempts. Sexual violence has also been used as a political weapon, where threats of sexual violence are used to intimidate women politicians. Public shaming based on gender norms also silenced many women. Social media platforms has become venues for gendered attacks, with women politicians facing levels of abusive content, threats, and disinformation. Threats against family members, particularly children, are used to pursue women to withdraw from politics as well. In conflict-affected regions of both countries, women politicians faced security risk, limiting their ability to campaign. If we focus on institutional challenges, we can see that while both countries have courts mechanisms to ensure quality of representation, it remains inadequate and sometimes treated as maximum rather than minimum thresholds. There's also lack of support systems. For example, limited childcare options, absence of family-friendly political schedules, and inadequate security provisions always creates political barriers. Resource gap for women candidates is also another issue. Campaigning finances rarely reaches women candidates at equal levels. Training and capacity building opportunities also remain limited. Women politicians receive less media attention and coverage that focuses more on personal attributes rather than the political policy positions that they're trying to focus on. These multifocal challenges creates a complex web of barriers that limited women's full and effective political participations, despite formal commitments to gender equality. Now, what are some of the recommendations that I have for improvement of women's political participations in Sudan and South Sudan? First is political recommendations, and the strengthening court systems is enforcement mechanisms where we need to develop clear penalties for non-compliances with existing codes. Quality of representation, we need to move beyond numbers to ensure women hold influential positions. We also need to extend codes to local governance structures and appointed positions, as well as reform rules for how parties select female candidates to prevent tokenism. In legal reformation, we ought to see that strengthening constitutional provisions for gender equality during reform processes are being carried out. We also have to see to it that modified electronical systems to be more favorable to women candidates, as well as eliminating remaining laws that restricts women's public participation, and specific laws against violence targeting women in politics. Inclusive security sector reform would be in the form of increasing recruitment and retention of women in police and military. Gender-sensitive training, like providing training on protection of women politicians and voters, as well as creating specialized units to investigate threats against women in politics. Some security protocols, for example, developing specific security protocols for women candidates during elections as well. Some institutional changes recommendation would be on political party reforms. For example, party structures need to reduce male gatekeeping as well as strengthening women's wings with resources and decision-making authority. We also need to create dedicated funds for women candidates, as well as leadership development by implementing mentorship programs within parties. Looking at government structures, we need to integrate gender analysis in all government departments, creating mechanisms for coordinating gender initiative across ministries, as well as strengthening gender equality committees and resources and mandates, which focus on women representation in local councils where many women began their political careers. Media and technology, we need to train journalism on gender-sensitive political coverage, as well as developing resources to protect women politicians from online harassments. That would ensure women politicians have equal access to digital tools and platforms, and that will support women's-led media initiatives to protect counter narratives. In the grassroots approaches, collaboration building will be the main focus, with formalizing collaboration across party lines on gender issues that will strengthen link between women politicians and civil society organizations, as well as connected experienced women leaders with younger activists. We also need to encourage men as alliances, which will identify and support male champions for gender equality in politics. Community engagements is also an important part that we need to focus on, with civic education, implementing targeted civic education programs in communities with low women participation, and engaging traditional authorities in dialogue about women leadership. Religious frameworks also need to work with religious leaders to articulate faith-based support for women's participation, as well as highlighting achievements of women politicians to change community perspectives. Economic empowerment would also link women's economic empowerment programs with political participations and develop community-based fundraising models for women candidates. And that will provide business-like skills that transfer to political leadership, as well as using women's cooperatives as basis for political mobilization. Education and capacity building is also important. With political science education, women's access to political science and public administration education that will integrate gender equality and women leadership in school curriculum. Literacy programs will target adult literacy programs to potential women leaders and creating of dedicated scholarships for women pursuing careers in politics. International support is also encouraged. Coordinated international support to avoid duplication and gap will help us move from short-term projects to sustainable multi-year programs that will create rapid response funds for emerging opportunities and facilitate learning exchanges with other post-conflict countries. Accountability mechanisms is also very important. That will support independent monitoring of women political participation. It will strengthen reporting mechanisms on international commitments. It will use diplomatic channels to address backsliding on women's rights and establish awards for progress in women's political inclusion. Specific context recommendation for Sudan. I wanted to point out the transitional justice that will ensure women's voices in transitional justice mechanism. Constitutional processes will secure women's participations in future constitutional developments. Resistant committees will build on women's participation in neighboring resistant committees and a state-level reform that will focus on states with low women's representation. In South Sudan, the points that can benefit us would be peace implementation, with the strengthening of women's role in the R-axis implementation mechanism. The oil revenue management would also ensure women's participation in natural resource governance. Reconciliation processes will center women's leadership in community reconciliation efforts and address specific needs of women political leaders returning from displacement. Those recommendations require constant effort from multiple stakeholders, including the government, political parties, civil society, and international partners. Progress will depend on sustained commitment and adaptation to evolve political context in both countries. Women's political involvement in Sudan and South Sudan embodies both the promises of transformational change and the struggle against deep-rooted obstacles. Their contributions are redefining political landscapes, fostering inclusive governance, and offering hope for a more equitable future in regions that urgently need healing and reform. In closing, the unwavering commitment of women in Sudan and South Sudan stands as a beacon of hope and a catalyst for change. Their relentless drive for inclusion and justice is not only reshaping political processes, but also forging pathways toward enduring peace and democratic renewal. As these nations continue to rebuild and reconcile, the empowerment of women remains indispensable, a testimony to the power of resilience and a guiding light for future generations. I leave you with this quote: the participation of women in politics is not simply about representation. It is about the transformation of society, where women lead, nations move closer to justice, equality, and lasting peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vera. We will open for a few minutes for questions and any questions from the audience here in the room or those online. Meanwhile, one last round of applause to give up.
Thank you.
Thank you.